If you're tired of not making progress and you're ready to be the artist you know you're meant to be, you're in the right place. You're listening to the Singer's Path podcast. The Path, or Performing Artists Training Hub, will cover everything, including singing tips that actually work, advice from top industry professionals, and life-changing mindset shifts. Out with the starving artist and in with the thriving artist. I'm your host, Sarah Bishop, professional singer, actor, educator, and entrepreneur. I'm not afraid to speak the truth and stop the gatekeeping of quality information so you can actually become the artist you dream of being. So let's get on the path, shall we? Even though we're all on our own journeys, it always helps to have a guide. Hello, and welcome to the Singer's Path podcast. Like I said in the intro, my name's Sarah, and I'm really excited to dive into some singing stuff with you today. Today, just because we're on the early end of the podcast's birth, right? She's a new little babe. I kind of wanted to start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, as we probably have many different levels of singers and artists. You don't have to be a singer specifically to benefit and listen to this podcast. And you definitely don't have to just be a beginner singer to listen to this podcast. You don't have to be an advanced singer. Like wherever you're at, I'm assuming if you have some kind of interest in expression and singing, you're perfect and you're exactly where you need to be. However, as we start this first episode off, we're really kind of diving into things. I wanted to set a foundation and really just give some love to perhaps the beginners that are listening or the people that maybe haven't quite let themselves start to sing yet. And I wanted to set us up and kind of work up from there so that, if you're an advanced singer and you're listening to this, maybe still stick around because you might learn some things that maybe, are new. And learning all kinds of information, even about the fundamentals of singing, which is kind of what we're getting into today. I think it's all valuable. And I know my idea of posture and breathing and, the things we first learned when we started to sing really did change actually when I became a voice teacher compared to when I learned it like back in high school, right? So I wanted to give you guys the first steps on how do we actually tackle singing, right? Like if we've never done it before, what do we learn? Like, what are we going to learn? I think for the most part, like anyone from like an outside in view looks at singing and they go, oh, well, it's obviously breathing. And there's something about the diaphragm. And I know you have to sit up straight, right? Like those are the first three things that a lot of people will say. And they'll be like, you open your mouth and you just like hold out these notes, right? If I'm trying to like step into someone that doesn't sing, how they describe singing. But like what makes singing different from talking? Are there similarities? And what about this breath stuff? Like how do you take a quote unquote singer's breath? How do you do it consistently? How do you hold these long notes like this? Okay. So we're going to kind of talk about this in a two-parter. So this is the first of the two. And in this one, we're really going to dive into breath and posture specifically. But it's important to know that, first of all, singing is a very complicated system, okay? And I know if you're just listening to this and you're just starting to sing and, you just want it to be easy and we can't overcomplicate it. Yes, like we just do need to focus on one thing at a time as we're building. But I think it's just helpful for anyone learning to sing to just like with integrity and honesty be like, listen, actually singing is literally the most complex thing you can do with your body and your brain. Like actually, like scientifically, they have proven that singing is a very like it can come naturally, but like the way that our brain and body is firing in this nuanced way is insane and incredible. So if it's not something that comes like super easily to you right off the bat from the womb, like don't beat yourself up because singing is a skill that can be learned just like anything else. So even as we're talking about the fundamentals and, it's going to be a lot of information, you might be like, whoa, like that's maybe a lot. Like we're just talking about breathing, right? Just take it one step at a time And just know that by listening and to trying some of these things out, you're already taking steps to create an amazing foundation that's going to set you up to learn more and more and more so that you can actually learn to play your beautiful voice as an instrument and sing the way you want to sing. So first of all, let's kind of get into these things. So breath is a big deal in singing. Okay, we all know that. We've heard of the operatic singing breath and how important it is. And I think sometimes what gets overlooked with breath is that it's used in different ways that we can focus on. Okay, there's our inhale, and what I like to call taking in our fuel, because when we sing, air is more or less our fuel. It's what causes our vocal folds, which we're going to talk a lot more in the second part of this. It causes the vocal folds to vibrate as the air passes through the vocal folds. Okay, so basically no vibration would happen, no sound would happen without air, right? So it's obviously very important. It's a piece of the puzzle that we absolutely need. However, there's other things to consider, right? There's how the vocal folds work against the air, which we'll talk about in the part 2 as well. And there's the volume of which it comes out, right? How much air passes through, right? There's also the pressure of the air, how much pressure is underneath the vocal folds. So all of this to say, when we talk about breathing in air, just know that it's not just about what kind of inhale you take. It's really more about how you use it. Obviously, the quality of the inhale you take is going to get you really far, and it's going to set you up for success. However, there are more pieces to the puzzle as you get more advanced. But for today, right now, I do want you just to focus on taking some nice quality breaths with me. Now, Sarah, you're like, okay, cool. You've been talking about like the complications of breath, but like, how do we actually take said breath? Okay. So breathing and the way you breathe is going to depend on the style, but I'm going to teach you like the most like across the board, since this is the basics of singing. How do we take the best quality breath? And the short answer, the simplest answer, is to relax your body as much as possible. And this is going to sound weird, but almost allow the air to drop in as low as you can. Okay, I know that sounds weird, but basically what we're aiming to do is to get the air to fall into the lower part of the lungs. If you think about the lungs as like the triangles that they are, right? And the pointy, narrow part at the top is the top of the lungs. I want you to ask yourself, have you ever heard of like maybe a chorus teacher, if you've ever had a voice lesson, they say, oh, you're taking high breaths. And they'll look at you taking a breath and they'll watch your like collarbones like moving or going up and down, or they'll try to look at your body from the outside, and based off of like what tension they see, they'll tell you that your breath is high. You're like, cool, what does that even freaking mean, right? When your breath is high, basically it just means you're filling up just the top part of your lungs. And for singing, we want to try to get that air to the bottom part of the lungs, right? So the only way to really do that is to relax your stomach and relax your body, open your throat. And instead of trying to suck the air in, right? Like wheeze it in and try, that word is try, right? Work to take in a big breath. I almost want you to think of releasing your belly, opening your mouth, and what if you took as quiet as a breath as possible? And if you're listening right now, you could even put your hand on your stomach. And if you were to do that and witness kind of allowing this air to drop in, what happens to your stomach? More often than not, if you have a hand on your belly will expand outwards. And this is because if you've successfully dropped the air to the bottom of your lungs, your diaphragm moves down, right? Now, this is where we're kind of getting into the diaphragm. You've probably heard of the diaphragm before, right? Sing from your diaphragm. Okay. I'm going to comment on that in a second. But the purpose of the diaphragm is to kind of move down to make space for this air that is filling up the lungs, right? So it's not it's not the thing doing the breathing necessarily. It's not the thing making the singing happen. It's an involuntary muscle that moves to make way for the air. And how it makes way for the air is it pushes your organs down out of the way. So if you have your hand on your belly and you know you're taking a deep breath and the bottom of your lungs are filling with air, your stomach will move out because that's that's where your organs are, right? Because your diaphragm is pushing them down and out to make space for the air. Does that make sense? So that's why your belly will actually go out when you inhale and it'll come in when you exhale. So let's just take a couple breaths together, exploring that for a hot sec. So you're going to inhale, exhale. Just notice what your belly's doing. Inhale, exhale. And so hopefully you're feeling the belly kind of relax and come out on the inhale. And then it's sucking, almost sucking, but not really. You're not like engaging. You're not really trying to suck it back in while the air is leaving, right? And that's more of the room that's being made for this air. Okay. Now, just to kind of loop back to that sing from your diaphragm thing, if you've ever heard someone say sing from your diaphragm, first of all, you can't do that. Like that's not like a thing that happens. Like, yes, you can put your intention on your stomach. And I'll tell you, like, the real life applications, if someone's actually tried to tell you that, it's either because they don't know what they're talking about and they think it's happening with breath support or anything like that, but sort of, right? If you've heard breath support before, there's different, it's really confusing. Like singing in general can be really confusing because everybody has a different like name for what they think something is. Okay. And nothing's like regulated. Okay. So like people can just like talk out of their ass and like say they know about breath support when they don't. Okay. So breath support, more or less, it can be a couple things, and it kind of depends on the person you're talking to. Like, what do they consider breath support and singing from the diaphragm, right? I would consider breath support actually resistance and how you use the air, which again, we're going to talk about in this second part here. But some people might look at breath support as like how much air you're actually getting in. So in that case, like singing from your diaphragm might be the quality of your inhale, right? Is your diaphragm moving down because your belly's going out? So that's considered breath support. Or some people might misconstrue breath support as the pressure that's under the sound. And we're going to have some fun here messing with our breath in a second. But like, I guess we can just do it right now. If you take your inhale again, okay? And I want you to pretend like you're going to flip a table, like you're lifting up something really heavy after you take it in, and you'll feel this kind of locking sensation in your throat and with your air. So like I'll demonstrate it. If I took an inhale and then I think of lifting something really heavy, right? That kind of squeezy feeling that will happen. That is pressure building up underneath of the vocal folds. Okay, that's breath pressure. And like, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many things that can do with breath that's not just the inhale and like is not just this like, mysterious support thing, right? Some people might think breath support is physical support and physical engagement. But for you, beginning singer or advanced singer or just interested hobbyist, whoever you are, just know that if you're confused about breath, like you're not alone. And even the most advanced singers who have been through years and thousands of dollars of education can get confused about breath. Okay. Just so you know. So that's breath pressure that we just practiced. And then you can also practice breath use for like long phrases. And basically it'll just teach you kind of how to manage blowing it out. However, I prefer to actually teach people to manage their air more through vocalises. So like actually using pitch and using that resistance that we talked about, because that's actually what I consider support. But I'm sure you've probably heard the classic like hissing exercise, which we can do together, which will teach you how to let the air come out more slowly, more or less. But that doesn't necessarily directly translate to pitching, but it's an interesting exercise if you've never done it before, right? So let's try that as a thing we're experimenting with air, where you're going to take this low, slow breath. I like to, when I take these inhales, I like to think low, slow, and silent. And that almost like gives me the best chance that I'm going to get this full low breath that I want. And when I say silent, I mean like we don't want to go, like I kind of was saying earlier, like that wheezing sound. We want to try to open our throat almost like we're yawning as we're taking that breath in, right? Where you can barely hear it. Okay, so that's what I mean by silent. The low is kind of feeling your stomach open and expand, and that feeling of like, okay, what if I dropped the air down inside of me? It's like a visual cue that's going to help you relax everything. And then the slow aspect is to also help you get as much air as possible and do so with as much relaxation as possible. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do one of those low, slow, silent breaths. And then we're going to hold a sustained S sound. And this is going to help us practice how much we can hold something and how long we can hold something before, our brain starts to get lightheaded and we feel like we don't have any more air left. Okay. So let's take a nice big breath. You can continue to keep your hand on your stomach so that you can feel like, oh, like my stomach's expanding and I can feel how relaxed my body is. Okay. And then as you do the hissing noise that we'll do together, I really want you to hiss like a snake, like tss, tss. You might feel, I hope you feel a little bit of a contraction of the abdominals come in as you start that hiss. Now we'll do one final exercise here. That's a pretty basic across the board breathing exercise. We'll hiss repeatedly like tss, 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 tss. We'll start to feel that contraction of the abdominals. But for right now, I just want you to take a big old breath, a big ass breath. I used to call it in high school. I want you to take a big ass, low, slow breath. And then just hold this hiss as long as you can. And you can pause the episode here because I'm not really going to like hold it out as long as you are possibly. But like we can start it together just so that you know what we're doing. We'll hold it for like 4 counts. And then you can pause it and like try it by yourself and then come back in. Because again, like I don't want to just be like, I'm like, that doesn't make for a very interesting listen. But let's do it together for like 4 counts so that you know what you're doing. And then you can time yourself. You can be like, oh, I wonder how long I can do this without feeling like I want to die. So let's try it together. Put your hand on your stomach. Low, slow, silent breath. And sorry, that was like 5 counts or whatnot. But anyway, you get the picture. Okay, so we want that nice hissy snake sound. Pause here if you want to like time yourself and like see how long you can hold it. And that is basically, well, sort of, not a great indication, but an indication nonetheless. If you can hold a note out for a long time, and it's supposed to teach you very basic air management, although I think there are better ways. But pause here and try it out if you want. Okay, if you paused it and you tried it out, how did it go? How long did you hold it? You can test yourself by getting better at letting less air come out for longer and seeing how long you can make your air last. Like that's what we used to do in high school choir, is just like have competitions as to who could hiss the longest. Okay. So we're going to do one more breathing exercise together here before we talk about posture. And I guess maybe I should have mentioned posture before this, but whatever, like you'll get the information in reverse order, I suppose. But with this last hissing pulse exercise, this is going to teach you more or less the contraction of the abdominals, which is important. You can put your hand on your stomach, right? Right below your ribs is where your diaphragm is located. And you can like put your intention on that area of your stomach snapping in. But it's not just your diaphragm moving, it's actually your abdominals that are moving. And if you've ever done yoga before, this is actually a yoga practice. I don't want to misquote what it's actually called because I don't actually know. Pranayama breathing or something. I'm not like a yogi, so I have done it in class, but I don't remember. So like, sorry, listener, if you're like offended that I don't know what that actual word is. But in this exercise, where it teaches us 2 things. It teaches us how to engage the abdominals for that physical, quote unquote, support that people talk about. That isn't actually support in my eyes. But we do need abdominal engagement as we're learning to sing. And we also need it, especially as we like move into doing like really belty, high, hard sustain notes. So this is a good fundamental exercise to get started with. And the second thing it teaches you is that it teaches you to allow the air to drop in without violently trying to suck it in. Because as we're doing this exercise, all you're supposed to focus on is the violent exhale and the snapping of the stomach. That's where I want you to put your attention. So you're going to put your hand on your stomach and you're going to be a really pissed off snake, okay? And you're going to be snake hissing over and over and over again, okay? With your stomach snapping in on each exhale, okay? And again, if you're focused on inhaling, it's not going to work, right? You have to actually just focus on exhaling violently and sharply, okay? And that is what's gonna happen is your stomach is gonna snap in over and over and over again because you're activating it. And then, to your surprise, you'll probably have air fall in, which is what it's trying to teach you, that air can fall in, and that you actually don't need as much as you maybe think you do. Okay, so you're gonna take a big breath and then we're gonna violently snap and with an S sound like a pissed off snake, and we're going to snap our bellies in and just focus on the exhale. Okay, so let's inhale together and let's do 8 together and breathe in. Snake jazz. Oh my God. If you're still listening and you haven't immediately turned it off, this is, again, supposed to teach you that kind of abdominal engagement. If you're confused, I would just practice it. And again, remember, the focus is snapping the stomach in, engaging the abdominals, and really just focusing on the exhale. And that's going to kind of teach you what your stomach should be doing as you're singing really difficult phrases that you'll eventually get to as you're kind of moving on to harder things. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about today in like singer basics, how do I start to sing? Like, what are the fundamentals? Okay, we've already covered how to take a nice, slow, low, and silent quality breath. We're going to talk about posture, and then I'll leave you with a couple key tips just to kind of keep floating in your brain. As we sing, okay, kind of a rule of thumb is we don't generally want to like collapse our chest in. We want to kind of keep our shoulders stacked over our hips. And again, this isn't a video, so you can't see me, but the best way to do this is to put your hands just at your side. If you get your shoulders to like rise and almost like touch your ears, like as if you're just like shrugging, you're like raise your shoulders really high. And then I want you to, if your arms are just dangling down, I want you to rotate your palms out away from your body. You can hear my shoulder crack. Or is it the steam heat? Who's to say? Or is it the whistling wind? I don't know. But just do it with me again. So I'm crazy. You're gonna lift your shoulders. Rotate your hands out away from your body, almost like your thumbs are going back towards your butt, okay? And then drop your shoulders there, okay? That automatically is going to reposition your shoulders from being like crunched in, okay? And then if you're standing, right, just have a gentle kind of bounce in your knee. We don't want to like lock back into our knees. Try to think of your pelvis being pretty neutral, right? We don't want it like sticking out in the back or curved in the front, right? And then the shoulders that we just did are just stacked right over top of the hips, okay? Now, as we get more advanced, we can talk about the head rotating and tilting. You can think about like if you watch belters and people singing like Whitney Houston singing a big loud note, pretty much anyone that's belting will kind of tilt their head up a little bit. And that's because of a shortening of the vocal tract that occurs when you belt versus opera singers that don't do that, right? Their vocal tract is very elongated with their head stacked over their shoulders, right? There shouldn't be a crunch, like your chin shouldn't like be crunching down necessarily, but in comparison, their head is pretty neutral and straight ahead, maybe tucked a little bit, but like barely, right? And that has to do with that sound requiring a longer vocal tract. So like there's different positioning that you can do as you get more advanced doing different things. There's also a reason, like I think a lot of belters like, put their arms out to the side while they're holding a big note because, it's engaging their back and it's helping them plant into the ground. Like there's other physical things besides just standing up straight that can happen. However, right now, again, you're just learning how to take a good old breath and you're learning to just stand up straight. And that's more or less the two fundamental things that you need. If you're sitting and you're singing, again, just making sure you're not collapsing your chest forward, that you're sitting like straight, but you're also not like, crunching into your back. Like, again, it's just like your shoulders over your spine and your shoulders rolled back. And then, your hips and your sits bones in a neutral position. One thing that they use in the Alexander technique, which is like a way of like being aware of your body as an artist. It's like a method of teaching physical awareness. And they teach us in ballet too, is like when you're sitting or you're standing, you can think of elongating through the spine and thinking of a string coming out through the top of your head to help you sit up straight. So that's another thing you can think about, right? So there's all kinds of tips and tricks that basically are trying to get you to take a good breath, whether it's focusing on your diaphragm or allowing the air to drop in or, imagining sucking through a giant straw or like, there's so many visuals that teachers will use to try to basically just get your body to relax and get as much air as possible. And then that also goes with, if you're a visual person, having the visual of the string coming through your head. That's more or less just teaching you to keep your, shoulders on top of your hips, on top of your feet, and keeping your spine straight so that you can actually get that good quality breath and you can use your instrument to the best of your ability because your body's lined up in the way to best serve you. So all that being said, those are the first two things that we mainly focus on with very, very beginner singers. And if you're an advanced singer, you probably know how to do this, but maybe you learned something different. If you're an advanced singer, and I'll just leave this little tidbit for you, if you tend to sing with a high larynx, which we're going to talk about way more here as we go on, but this can be a really great reset for you. It's actually called a tracheal reset breath. And you can add a little bit of a K in front of your inhales. You can go like make a tiny K noise and then open your throat into that breath. That will reset the larynx to a lower position. So say you're like singing some really bratty high stuff for a long time and you do one of those breaths, it'll kind of like reset you. You can also just exaggerate your breath throughout your song. If you notice that it's getting high and you're feeling like unstable and it's too tight, just thinking like open, slow, and low while you're in your song, that will also reset the larynx, right? Because it pulls it down. So if the larynx is really high and you take a low breath, it'll pull it down, okay? Anyway, for the beginner singers that are like, what are we talking about the larynx for? We're going to talk about inside the larynx here in the next episode. But again, basically stand up straight, take a nice breath. That's kind of it, right? To just get you started. It's a very complicated system, like I mentioned, but if those are the first two things you think about, is like, oh, my breath feels relaxed. I like to equate taking a nice deep breath as like, when you're like deep asleep and someone like wakes you up and you're like, right? Like you just take the fullest breath of your life when you're in that deep asleep, like a life was breathed into you again. That's a good example of like taking as much air as you can. Okay. Now, as we're practicing these breaths and practicing this good posture, just know that although we're practicing taking in as much air as we possibly can, this is like a pretty classical approach to singing. One of the biggest things that ends up screwing up singers in the long run is that they actually blow too much air out while they're trying to sing in contemporary styles. So just because we're learning to breathe in this way as a fundamental practice for like just having it at our disposal, that does not mean that you're always going to have to breathe like that much air in, and especially not have to use that much air. I think, and this is my opinion, and this is based into my own study of singing different styles and mastering mixed belt versus more classical head singing. This is a little bit sacrilegious, but it's true. You don't need hardly as much air to belt and sing more like chesty talked songs as you do classical singing. And this is where you young, new beginner singer person just interested in it. I don't want you to like get in your head being like, well, to sing Shania Twain, I have to take in this much air. That don't impress me. But like if you try to take in that full of a breath where your stomach's literally expanding and it's to the basis of your lungs and you have so much and you're just starting out, it's actually going to be harder for you to manage that much air than it would be if you just took a breath like you were talking. Okay. And again, we'll get into this more in later episodes when we're talking about what is chest voice and how much air do we actually need and what's going on. But for you right now, right, just know that this big old breath is really only going to be used either if you're singing classical music or if you're really holding a long sustained note. So we kind of prepare for the extremes. We learn how to do a good quality thing. And then we also know that like it's not one size fits all. And we always have permission to take the amount of breath that we're going to need for the thing that we're singing. Okay. And with that, that kind of concludes our first like a mini lesson on just covering the basics, like the fundamentals of like, how do I even get started? Like, how do we simplify something that's not very simple, but like give you some actionable things to practice, right? So that you can kind of get started in making it accessible to you. So yeah, that's breathing. And if you've been studying for a while, maybe I said something a little different from what your opera teacher in college said, because I know there's some classical people that have some opinions that, singing this way is the only way. And the truth is and you probably know this if you've tried, if you try to take these big breaths that I explained and I try to sing Kelly Clarkson, you try to sing anything belty, like you'll blow your voice out because there simply is too much air. And you have to learn what is the right amount of air for the style you're singing. So all that to say, I hope that you learned something new. And I hope that, if you're an advanced singer, listen to this. Maybe if you're having the problem that I'm explaining, where you're literally blasting your vocal folds apart because there's so much airflow, because your breath is so large and you have so much air coming out and you're just flopping your vocal folds together. If that's happening to you, maybe, I don't know, take less air. Maybe take a smaller breath. Maybe even exhale before you go, just to show yourself that you actually will be okay if you try to do it. I know that's sacrilegious, and this is like one of the first episodes out the gate, but I find this as being one of the most common misconceptions of air use. And it might solve your problem. So give it a shot, give it a try, and you can always DM me and let me know if it works, if it helps solve your problem. And if you're a beginning singer and you have questions about stuff and you engage with my social media, I try my best to read things. Sometimes I do have to filter through it because there's a lot of people, but I like to make content around this too. So if you have any questions about this kind of stuff, like engage with my stuff, like comment on the videos. And ask questions. And, sometimes I go live and I talk about it, but, I really like to help you guys have access to like good quality stuff, because let's be real, there's some pretty vague, pretty generic shit out there. So, and all that being said, I'm really, 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 really excited to announce, for the first time on here, that I'm offering a free class. Oh my God, that's going to happen at the end of March. Right now, the date for this event is, oh my God, why can't I find it on my calendar? Where is the date? Pause. It's called, I found it, drum roll, Starting to Sing, a Safe Space for New Singers. Now, again, if you're not a new singer, I still encourage you to sign up because A, free class, and B, we're actually going to be talking about the deeper layers that kind of need to be touched and looked at before we even start to take a private lesson with someone. We're going to be exploring how do we get our bodies ready and our like brains and our hearts in a space where we feel safe enough to really get the most out of our lesson. How do we get our bodies feeling comfortable enough to feel confident going into a voice lesson? What should we expect going into a good quality voice lesson, right? So this class is all about preparing your nervous system, your heart, your spirit, and your brain to really get the most out of voice lessons. So it doesn't even really matter if you've been taking voice lessons your whole life, or if you've wanted to, or you've thought about it and you feel like it's really scary and weird and you don't know what to expect. So we're going to uncover blocks and stories that people have around their voice. We're going to talk about the power of freeing your voice and unlocking your true vocal potential. And we're going to get familiar with some of maybe the funny, weird sounds that we use in learning to sing and what they can really do for us. So this is like a way that I like to give back to my followers and my community. So I'd really, really appreciate to see you there. Signups are available in the show notes down below. You can also find the signups on my social medias. My handle's @singwithbish. You can always DM me if you want more details, but I'm going to kind of lay it all out down below, and there'll be more info on my socials kind of explaining what it is. But I really, it would be a shame if you didn't take this opportunity to get some more free information that would really help you. So I'm really excited for you to be there. I really hope to see you there. A replay will be available if you can't attend live, but it will only be available for probably around 48 hours. So really show up for yourself. Take advantage of something that will be of great value that is free. And with that, I will see you next week for part 2 of Singing Basics. And I really hope to see you in our free class at the end of the month, starting to sing. I'll see you there. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. This helps me get this information out to more artists all over the world. Let's work together to spread the joys of music. Until next time, I'm your host, Sarah Bishop, signing off from the Singer's Path podcast. Thanks for listening.